Hello, I'm Jake Boudrot, Civic Journalist at Tello Community Television. This week, on The Record, the Member of Parliament for Breton-Canso talks about provincial and federal politics. A Richmond County organization that promotes Indigenous artists receives federal funding. The president of the Nova Scotia Nurses Union talks about the state of nursing care. But first, the MLA for Richmond is appointed to the provincial cabinet. Tim Houston was sworn in as Nova Scotia's new premier on December 12th, along with the government's new cabinet, which includes Richmond MLA Trevor Boudreau, who is the Minister of the new Department of Energy. Indigenous MLA Michelle Thompson continues as Minister of Health and Wellness, Minister of the Office of Healthcare Professionals Recruitment, and the Minister responsible for Healthcare Redevelopment. Guysborough-Tracadie MLA Greg Morrow continues as Minister of Agriculture. The Premier continues as President of the Executive Council, Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, Minister of Priorities and Planning, and Minister of Trade. Barbara Adams is the Deputy Premier and Deputy President of the Executive Council, and continues as Minister of Seniors and Long-Term Care and the Minister responsible for Military Relations. John Lohr is the Minister of Finance and Minister of Labour Relations, and continues as Minister of Municipal Affairs. Timothy Hallman continues as Minister of Environment and Climate Change. He is also the Minister of Service Efficiency, formerly the Office of Regulatory Affairs and Service Efficiency. Kim Maslin becomes Minister of the Department of Emergency Management. Tory Rushton remains as Minister of Natural Resources. Colton LeBlanc is the Minister of Growth and Development, formerly known as Economic Development. Housing is now part of the department. Minister LeBlanc will continue his responsibilities as Minister of Acadian Affairs and Francophonie. Brian Comer continues as Minister of Addictions and Mental Health. Jill Balzer will lead Service Nova Scotia and Cybersecurity and Digital Solutions. Becky Druhan is the new Attorney General and Minister of Justice. She also becomes the Provincial Secretary and the Minister responsible for the Office of Equity and Anti-Racism. Kent Smith continues as Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture. Twyla Gross continues as Minister of African Nova Scotian Affairs and Minister of the Public Service Commission. Brendan Maguire becomes the Minister of Advanced Education and the Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development. David Ritchie is the Minister of Communities, Culture, Tourism and Heritage, as well as Gaelic Affairs. Fred Tilley is in charge of the Department of Public Works. Nolan Young becomes the Minister of Labour, Skills and Immigration. Scott Armstrong is the Minister of Opportunities and Social Development, formerly the Department of Community Services. Liam Martin is the Minister of Communications Nova Scotia, Minister of Inland Affairs, Minister responsible for the Advisory Council on the Status of Women Act, and Minister responsible for Youth. With me today is the MP for Breton-Canso. Welcome back, Mike Kelloway.
Great to be here, Jake.
So I know you're a federal member of Parliament, but I'm wondering if you'd like to weigh in on what took place a week ago in the election here in Nova Scotia, where the Liberal Party was reduced to 2 seats. What's your reaction to this result?
Well, it's an amazingly tough loss for provincial Liberals, Zach Churchill, and everyone that put their name on the ballot for sure. But I will say that Tim Houston ran a very good campaign. For the most part, I think every leader stayed on the issues. And I think it was, reaffirming people's trust in him. There's no question about that in terms of where he has the province and where he wants to take the province. And he'll get another 3 or 4 years, depending on when he wants to pull the plug next time. But yeah, disappointing for sure. And but provincial politics is it's important to not extrapolate too much from how it impacts federal politics. I look at Susan Holt in New Brunswick and where she won, and I look at NDP in BC and in and in Saskatchewan, I believe, or Manitoba, where they've won. But I think there's lessons to be learned. I think that there is certainly opportunity for the provincial Liberal Party to now, quite frankly, do some self reflection on where they want to go as a party, what do they want to stand for as a party, to reinvigorate the base, to look at modern day elections and modern day politicking throughout the years leading up to an election. But it was a tough loss, no matter how you look at it provincially. And of course, we look at it with a keen eye here from a federal perspective, but know that there's considerable differences. One is that the Conservative Party federally is not the provincial Conservative Party provincially. They have a distinct set of viewpoints on where they want to take the country, and it no surprise, we polar opposite to where I would like to have the country be and go, from cuts to austerity to limited government, and to the reduction of programs that people rely on. It's certainly a form of government that people can vote for, but I think those are going to be the things that are going to be different. And I also think too, in 2025, there's going to be a distinct opportunity and a distinct line in the sand of where we want to go. And we'll have the federal parties with their leaders leading the charge, but it's also going to be a lot of local politics, a lot of regional politics, and it's going to be focusing on who's brought what to the table and whose work ethic is better than the next person, and so forth and so on. But I look forward to the next election, Jake, and I'll tell you why. Because again, I think it's going to be a distinct opportunity to look at our own riding, for example, of Cape Breton, northeastern Nova Scotia. The federal Conservatives want nothing to do with green hydrogen and offshore wind. They've voted against it at every turn. In fact, I think that is the huge opportunity, along with the fishery, to create a mega industry for Cape Breton and northeastern Nova Scotia. So there's a difference between the provincial progressive conservatives and the federal conservatives. The provincial conservatives, progressive conservatives, believe in what we're talking about: green hydrogen, offshore wind, things of that nature, while the conservatives federally don't. So they're two distinct beasts, but things to learn from for sure. And it's been an interesting month. We've had a provincial election, we've had an election to the south that brings with it its own set of, I think, opportunities and certainly challenges.
You mentioned there's lessons that to be learned. Do you feel that the provincial Liberals may have gotten too far away from the what the federal Liberals are advocating? And I'm thinking of things like the carbon tax, where the Liberals advocated more of a cap and trade system, which, although somewhat similar, is different. Do you think that the provincial Liberals are trying to get away from being Liberals?
Well, I think that, quite frankly, I think that's going to be for the provincial Liberal Party to kind of drill down deep. Some of the stats that I've seen is that the awareness of the Canada carbon rebate, is greater in Atlantic Canada than the rest of the country. And I think that, my advice would have been to the provincial Liberals is, to look at that carbon rebate, to look at that carve out that Nova Scotia federal Liberals were able to achieve in terms of heat pumps for those that can't afford it, and interest free over 10 years for those that can, and an exemption on home heating oil for a number of years. Those are things to get us through the transition. But it's easy to second guess, say. I could say that one of the things I was impressed with, and it speaks to the humility of people. I watched all the speeches, concession speeches, and the winning speech, and all of them were good. But I mean, I think Zach spoke from the heart, and it's easy to be a leader during the good times. It's really hard to be a leader during the bad times, but it speaks to people's character. And I think Zach, although it was a very tough loss, handled it with a lot of class. And that's what I would think that the provincial Liberals need to do. I think the provincial Liberals need to look at everything. Quite frankly, everything is on the table in terms of direction, leadership, towards policies that speak to Nova Scotians, and to be able to communicate that not just in an election cycle, but throughout the year. And it's the tough work, but it's the most rewarding work. And I call it the grunt work in a very positive way, of going riding to riding throughout the 4 years, and meeting with, if it's 3 people, or if it's 30 people, or it's 300 people, and listen to them. listen to them. It's kind of like what I've done with a number of things where it's dental care, farmer care, and getting behind that. I listen to the people back home. A tax break for on HST for 2 months. That, it's not a surprise that MPs brought that particular policy idea to the prime minister and cabinet. So it's not something that came out of the air from Mike Kelloway. It comes from people in Ayrshire. It comes from people in St. Peters and Judique and Guysborough County. But it's surprising when you listen. There's some gems in terms of policy ideas to help Canadians, and they usually come from Canadians, if you're listening.
Now, locally, if you look at the provincial results, the areas that make up the federal riding did vote heavily conservative, progressive conservative. And I know you're planning on seeking re-election. Does that give you some pause for thought, or are you looking at it? It's a provincial result and not necessarily reflective of what people are going to do if and when the upcoming federal election is called.
Yeah, it's a great question. I remember in August of 2021, Jake, and the provincial results came in, and basically every provincial riding that is in my federal riding was blue, and progressive conservative blue. And then the month after that, we had my election, federal, and we increased our vote count significantly. And I think it speaks to what people bring to the table. So I think some people, let's make no mistake about it, some people will vote, they'll vote progressive, conservative, and conservative. There's no question. But I think there's a large progressive, in particular, the word progressive conservative, that I was able to achieve in the last election because of hard work and results. And you look at it, I was tallying this up this morning in terms of just looking at the green hydrogen offshore wind industry in Cape Breton and northeastern Nova Scotia with the agreement with Germany, which is 300 million. That'll find much of it will find its way to Cape Breton and northeastern Nova Scotia. The 22 million to Everwind, and an announcement I'm going to make in January in terms of wind power. That's probably a little over 200 million. That's almost $500 million in less than a year to the Strait area and Cape Breton and northeastern Nova Scotia. And so I think people look at those results. I think people look at your work ethic and what you're going to produce and what you have produced. Consequently, they can do the same for a competitor and say, well, this person has done this, and this demonstrates their worth and their ability to represent their community in Ottawa and actually be aggressive and make no exceptions that Cape Breton and northeastern Nova Scotia are friendly to business, friendly to opportunity, and Kelloway is going to get as much as he can for his riding. That's what a lot of people say up here. So I think that those are going to be opportunities. But look, when you take a loss provincially, you analyze what you could be doing better federally. And I think that's a real key thing. But I do think there are two distinct features. And I think, again, I'll go back to it. I think they're two distinct parties federally. I think the provincial Liberals and the federal Liberals are distinct. They share a name and they share a common bond, but we do have differences. And I would say, if you're a progressive conservative, that usually means what's in the word. You're middle of the road. You want fiscal management, but you also see the importance of social programs and investing in people and investing in seniors, youth, the middle class, working class. We share those, I would argue, with the progressive conservatives in Nova Scotia from a federal perspective, and as we do with the Liberals provincially. The conservatives federally is a different beast. And I said that in 2019 when I ran against Alfie MacLeod, that when you're running for the Conservative Party federally, you're running in a party that's a coalition. And it's a coalition between two groups. It used to be progressive, conservative, and conservative. Now it's not that. It's right wing and really right wing. And that's a choice. And that, whenever the election is called in 2025, I can tell you this. There'll be no one working harder than me to make that distinction on what we've delivered, but the distinction of where you want to go. Where do you want to take Cape Breton in northeastern Nova Scotia? Because right now, and again, Mr. Poilievre has been very clear on this, is that he'll be making some substantial cuts, but he's not saying what. There's a lot of slogans and buzzwords, but he's not saying what. Now, he'll have his time during a campaign to unpack what he's going to do. But if we look at what he had done as a senior member of the Harper Party, they cut a lot. They cut an EI center in Glace Bay. They cut veterans offices. They um, increased the age of retirement from 65 to 67. They cut a lot of programs. They cut the fisheries to the bone, whereby it's been a long time to recover from reduction in personnel, reduction in science, reduction in small craft harbors. So these are the things we're going to have to talk about. But, I'll be making the clear distinction of that. But it's a great question. And it's one, it's an interesting one to see. I would love to talk to some folks in New Brunswick and get their take on how that election went, what impacted that election. But I think every election is different. And, now that we've had a provincial election completed, we have an American election completed. We know what Churchill said, events, dear boy, events, meaning that things happen in daily life that impact the future in ways that you didn't think. So, whether it's the American election or the provincial election, I have a great relationship with Tim Houston. We may have some disagreements, but we usually keep those quiet and one on one. So, I mean, that's going to continue. I have a great relationship with the MLAs in the riding. That is going to continue because fundamentally, I represent the Liberal Party, but my approach has been what's going to help community, and how do I fight to get it, and who do I work with to get it, and who do I fight against to get it. And that's been my motto from day one. I mean, in January, you're going to see some significant announcements in the riding that are a result of that cooperation between community and me. And I'm looking forward to that.
Now, you mentioned that you feel the Conservatives are not supportive of the green energy projects that are proposed for this neck of the woods. And, do you feel that that's something that can really hamper them in the upcoming federal election?
I think it could. And certainly will be presenting the case in a fair and balanced way. They voted against Bill C-49, which was basically changing the regulatory framework in the Atlantic Accord to enable us to have an industry in Cape Breton and northeastern Nova Scotia. Now, the provincial Progressive Conservatives were in favor of that. I want to make that clear. But the Conservatives stalled, and voted against. That is around saying no to economic development in Cape Breton and northeastern Nova Scotia. It is saying that we're not capable of leading a major industry in Canada. It's absolutely disrespectful to the people that I serve, and people will have to account for that in terms of if they're running for the Conservatives. Are you supportive of this, or are you against this? People will have to, certainly look at the last budget and probably the fall economic statement where Conservatives voted against a COA, funding for a COA. They voted against monies for small craft harbors. They're against the breakfast program for kids in Nova Scotia that we want to work with Tim Houston to implement. They voted against a tax cut. Now, my goodness, Mr. Polyev says axe the tax every time he breathes. But he voted against an HST tax cut for the next 2 months. So I think the proof is kind of coming out in the pudding that it's kind of trying to follow the bouncy ball on where Pierre Poilievre goes. But one of the common areas he goes to is just providing slogans, just providing bumper stickers, and talking about cuts in a very hidden but yet direct way. And I think that's going to be a key thing. I love my riding, love the people in it. I don't think we're served by a potential government that is going to cut us to the bone. I just don't. Now, do we have to have sound fiscal management processes? Absolutely. During COVID, we had to spend a lot of money to help a lot of people. But I do believe Canada is stronger, and our riding is certainly stronger when we have programs that we can rely on. I'm desperately worried about the Conservatives getting their hands on EI. Desperately. But I'm ready to fight for that. I'm ready to fight for the people, like I have been. I think the proof's in the pudding. You don't see me every 4 years looking for your vote. I try to get out there what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, who am I doing it with.
Now, on another topic, you recently announced that the village of St. Peters was approved for a non-repayable federal funding of $200,000 to transition an unused building, which is the former Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation store, into a community hub. According to Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, the investment will support renovations to accommodate a visitor information center, the Eastern Counties Regional Library branch, and Village Fitness which will be managed by the Village Fitness Center Cooperative. McCoa said upgrades include new walls, washroom improvements, mechanical and electrical updates, new lighting, and the addition of a third main level entrance. The contractor will start the building improvements this month, and with a planned completion date of March 2025, McCoa noted. How important is it for your government, for you, to support projects like these?
Absolutely. It's absolutely critical. And again, I think that's what would distinguish us from the Conservatives federally, because we're the money that comes to invest in this community initiative-led initiative is from ACOA. And to support community, that's what it's all about. When the community and the group, like the group you just mentioned, says, we have a plan, we have a vision, and here's how we want to achieve it. And here's who's going to benefit the people of St. Peter's and surrounding areas. Sign me up to that. And I took a tour a couple of years ago of the former liquor store, but I can see their vision from when they were kind of showing me around and explaining what they wanted to do. Now we're going to be able to do it. So this making investments in people. When you make investments in people, you're investing. Make no mistake about it. You're investing in people's health, mental and physical. You're providing options and opportunities for people in the community, and also for people who want to travel. When they travel through the community, maybe they stop in St. Peters, maybe they stop in Richmond County just for a little bit longer and spend a little bit more money. That's really, really key. That's really, really important. So um, that's about investing in people and infrastructure. And it's something that and I think his name is John Wilkinson. No, John Williamson, and New Brunswick Conservative MP, who said about a year ago, we need to cut ACOA. And when you cut ACOA, you're cutting opportunity for people. You're cutting that. That St. Peter's initiative does not happen without the support of ACOA. It's leading the charge. The community is leading the charge. They've got another investment, but it makes it much more difficult to happen without ACOA. And ACOA is there to serve the people of Atlantic Canada. And we have a strong ACOA presence in our riding. To cut that to the bone would be criminal. It would be impactful. And we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing in St. Peter's. On a little side note, what we're going to do in Ayrshire. Can't tell you what the project is, but there's something coming. And we couldn't do things like local transit. We couldn't do things like invest in a potentially mega industry for Cape Breton and northeastern Nova Scotia. And you have to believe in people. And when you cut programs that people rely on to make things happen, you're giving up on people. And you're giving up on opportunity. And you're giving up on the present and future that we can be masters of our own homes. That we have the ability in town, but we just need a little investment, a little bit of support, a little bit of acknowledgement. I don't believe in the invisible hand. I believe government has a role, doesn't have the role, but has a role. And I think that's a perfect example of it. I'm so proud of the people of St. Peter's, because without them, it doesn't happen. But I'm so proud of the people in the entire area, whether it's an Ayrshire project or whether it's projects we're going to be announcing very soon in January. It all comes from the community, ideas and the sweat equity and the investment. And when they come to the federal government looking for investment and they have a lot of skin in the game, I'm going to be there every time. And also too, to go back to, politics for a second, people can look at other politicians' records and see what they've delivered. It's not about a title. It's not about a name. It's about what you've delivered. And I look forward to delivering more for folks in my area. I can tell you that.
Yeah, you just alluded to two announcements coming up, one in Arishat and then a wind energy project or to kind of complement the green energy projects that are being proposed in Point Tupper. So are there any other projects in that are coming?
Yes, there are. But I'll get into major trouble if I bring it up. But I wanted to give you a little tidbit because I think, as we go into 2025, there's a lot to be proud of in our riding, and there's a lot to be proud of from everyone that lives there. And we're doing a lot. Nationally, I mean, nationally, we have dental care now. If you look at the numbers, we're over 1 million in Canada. 9,000 There are 9,000 people in our riding that have signed up that have and are receiving dental care. Dental care is healthcare. I always believe this, and I believe primary care is the same deal with diabetes and contraception, and we'll be working with the province to make that happen. The difference between the Conservatives and say myself, say me and Mr. Polyev, I believe that your health card should entitle you to health care. He thinks it's your credit card. I think it's a fundamental difference. If you believe in that, then you go up here. If you believe that the status quo is not an option, meaning we need a strong health care act, we need public health care, but we need to evolve it to include dental care. We need to include pharmacare. And that's the difference in terms of the status quo. Mr. Polyev would say, I don't like the status quo either, but I just want to go an American style approach to healthcare. Okay, fair enough. That's your choice. And I'm the same in name only, that I don't like the status quo, but I want to keep public health care. I want to strengthen public health care. I want to provide more monies to Nova Scotia, like we've done this year. About 200 million more on top of the transfers that they get. Now, the province administers it. But that's a fundamental difference. If you're in Arishat, is the private option your option? Or is it a stronger public health care? If you're in Inverness, if you're in Whitehead, or Harvey-Boucher, or Antigonish, or Sydney, or Glace Bay. We hold healthcare dear. We know it needs to be strengthened. But going to an American-style approach is the antithesis of where, in particular, in rural Canada, I believe we want to go. And so dental care, farmer care, the cuts to the HST, these are real things that are happening to people, for people. And that's my style.
Well, I really appreciate you taking time out of what I'm sure is a busy schedule to sit here and answer my questions and speak with our viewers. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it, and hi to everyone back home, and see you soon.
The federal government announced funding of $67,980 to support the Friends United Strategic Planning Initiative. According to the federal government, the Friends United Foundation empowers Indigenous artists, fights prejudice, and promotes cultural understanding through art. The funding will support the development of a strategic plan and in-person sessions to enhance the organization's capacity and improve market access for Indigenous artists selling their artwork, noted the federal government. Approximately 30 artists who currently sell their art nationally and internationally through the gallery at the Friends United International Convention Center in Cleveland will be supported by this initiative, the federal government said, noting that this funding will also help the foundation reach a wider audience and further showcase the work of Indigenous artists. Rolf Bowman, founder of the Friends United Foundation, said the financial contribution from Canadian Heritage will allow the organization to build a stronger organization, which will assist in many ways its reconciliation efforts with Indigenous peoples in Canada. The funding comes from the organizational capacity building component of the Multiculturalism and Anti-Racism program, which helps organizations build and strengthen their internal capacity to advance anti-racism and promote intercultural and interfaith understanding, providing equitable opportunities, promoting dialogue on multiculturalism and anti-racism, and building understanding of disparities. Breton-Canso MP Mike Kelloway said this funding will allow the gallery to be an essential part in extending the visibility of local Indigenous artists throughout the world. He said these artists will be able to gain the support they deserve in an ever-evolving industry and advance their creativity. The Friends United Foundation is a not-for-profit organization incorporated in 2023 and located in Richmond County. Its mandate is to provide talented and emerging Indigenous artists with the business skills, support, and encouragement needed to become independent, self-sufficient entrepreneurs. The organization aims to elevate the profile of Indigenous artists and reduce barriers to Indigenous culture by offering gallery spaces to showcase artists' work, workshop space to collaborate, and opportunities to engage in dialogue with visitors from around the world. With me today is the president of the Nova Scotia Nurses Union. Welcome, Janet Hazelton.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I guess first off, we'll start with the current state of nursing care in Nova Scotia.
So we are still continuing to experience a nursing shortage in this province, particularly with our registered nurses. We're down several hundred, but we are making progress. We're keeping our new grads as much as we can. So there's been incentives in place to keep our new grads, like tax benefits and some student loan forgiveness. So we've increased our seats within our province so that we're educating more nurses, which is another good thing. And we're attracting internationally educated nurses from all kinds of different countries: England, Scotland, Wales, the Philippines. So those nurses are coming to this province from another country and are getting jobs as nurses in this country. And the process to get a license has been streamlined, so it's more efficient and the access is better and quicker.
So you mentioned shortages and specifically as it pertains to registered nurses. And are you able to quantify how big that shortage is?
Well, it's over 1,000. And when we put that in perspective, that would be about 1/10 of the workforce.
But as you noted, there are some gains being made and some progress. And it looks like there's some room for optimism that those shortages, RNs being among them, can be addressed at some point in time.
Yeah, because it's certainly the vacancies are decreasing. Not as quickly as we'd like and not as quickly as we need, but they are decreasing. So that's a good sign. But this problem took years and years to manifest itself. And so it's not going to be fixed overnight. It's not going to be fixed in a year. It takes 4 years to educate a registered nurse. And so that in and of itself is time. And so it's even when you increase seats, it takes 4 years before you see that increase, because you increase the seats, it's still going to take 4 years before those young men and women are graduated.
Now, as with most professions that are demanding physically and mentally, and nursing is, of course, no exception to that, there is some level of attrition where people who are trained and educated as nurses don't stay as long in the profession as they'd planned or as they'd hoped, and just, for whatever reasons, decide that they want to go into another profession or don't want to stay in nursing. How is that rate of attrition, and is that rate being combated by new people being introduced into the profession? Are there enough nurses replacing those who are leaving?
That's really hard to quantify. Every time we talk to the health authority and others, there's a new number every day. And so we have nurses retiring from full-time positions, but they're coming back and working part-time or working casual. And so the retires from their full-time position. So it's really difficult to get a handle on that, but it feels like it's getting a bit better, but it's hard to say for sure. But some of the challenges that we have within nursing that have to be addressed is, of course, the violence. There's way too much violence in our healthcare facilities. For whatever reasons, patients, families, visitors are not respectful of the fact that this is our workplace. We're doing everything we can to help you and your family. And if there's a wait or a delay, or if there's something that we say that you didn't want to hear, doesn't make it not true just because you didn't want to hear it. But taking that out physically or verbally on the nurse is not appropriate. And it happens far too often. And when it does happen, after a while, nurses get discouraged and say, well, enough. I don't need this. I can go and work somewhere else and not have to suffer this kind of abuse. So we have to get a handle on that. Once we, it's sort of a never-ending cycle. When you have a shortage, you require nurses to work more hours. When you require them to work more hours and not have their vacation, then they get frustrated, and that again is a reason why they would choose to leave. So we have to look at those issues and address those issues if we're going to stop the nurses that are currently in the system from leaving the system. They're not leaving the system because they don't like their job and they don't like being a nurse. They're leaving their system because they're not getting time off. There's too much violence, there's too many injuries, and they're working short-staffed too many times.
Now, these incidents of violence that you're referring to, are those occur within certain sectors of the healthcare system, such as emergency departments and specific units within hospitals, or does it seem to be run across the gamut of the healthcare sector?
I would say emergency rooms for sure are up there, but it's in every unit, in every hospital in this province. When we asked our nurses if they had been physically or verbally abused last year, over 80% said yes. So that's a lot. It's happening far too often, and we really have to fix it, or nurses are just going to say, I'm just not doing it.
Now, what are the options there in this situation? Is it a matter of more security to help the nurses out?
Yep, that's one of the things. We need more security. We need people to stop doing it. We need people to be removed from facilities when they do it. And it doesn't take it. We need a culture change that it's not okay. For example, very few police officers have issues with this, and it's because people know you don't hit a police officer, because if you do, the consequences are very serious. And so we need to have that same mentality within the healthcare system, that, if you do abuse a healthcare worker, then the consequences are going to be significant, up to and including being charged with assault, because that's what it is. It's assault.
And I suppose there's the possibility of some legislative remedy there where you have some laws backing this up, where
We do.
Nurse is in the middle of performing her duties and is assaulted, that there are some penalties for that.
And we do have them. The problem is, getting the nurse to do it, getting the police officers or the RCMP to actually do it. So it's a lot of people saying, well, there's lots of reasons why, mental health, they're senior, they're stressed out, they're hurt. There's all kinds of reasons. And I think we need to park all that and say, you know what, the courts can figure this out. We shouldn't leave it up to the nurse to be making these decisions in the middle of a busy shift. It's just, if you assault someone, you need to be removed. And the law enforcement need to be involved. It's that simple. And eventually people will understand, like they do with police officers. They'll understand that if I do this, there's consequences for my behavior. Because right now, there is no consequences. Sometimes there is, but for the most part, there isn't. And so that's not okay, and we need to fix it. The issue is we're not using them, and that's partly my responsibility, is to educate nurses, to let them know, and to make sure they're doing it. And also to educate our police officers and RCMP that this is a law and they are breaking it. And so we need a lot of education, but more importantly, we need a stable security within our facilities, because the issue is stopping the violence before it starts, seeing it before it happens, intervening before it happens. None of us want to be in a place where this is happening. So, we don't want to be there. When it happens, we need it dealt with appropriately. But more importantly, we need for it not to happen. We need to identify it early, and we need to intervene be successful in that intervention.
Now, earlier you spoke of shortages, and you also spoke of nurses being understaffed at times too. What are the main remedies for that? I know you spoke about, your take on it too, but is there more that can be done to help combat this or avoid these situations?
Well, increased staffing certainly will help. Security that is properly trained to deal with this will certainly help. Making people understand that it's not appropriate, and when we see it, we need to react to it. So if we're in a waiting room and you see something, then it's okay to say, hey, you shouldn't probably be doing that. No, no different than sometimes we're in a lineup at a restaurant or somewhere, and we see people being inappropriate or rude or verbally abusive. As a society, we need to start saying, you know what, that's just not okay, instead of allowing it to happen in our society. We need to call people out, and I'm not suggesting that we get in altercations with people in lineups, but I think people sometimes don't understand how they're coming across. They don't understand that how they're presenting themselves is not okay. They don't get that necessarily. And so I think sometimes you just need to be reminded that you shouldn't be speaking to me that way, or the way you're speaking to me is not appropriate, or I'm taking offense. We need to start challenging people on their behavior.
The current progressive conservative government was elected in 2021, chiefly on a promise to fix healthcare. From your perspective, and I know you deal specifically with nursing care, but the sectors around nursing that are affected by and deal with nursing on a daily basis, do you see that there's some improvements being made in the overall healthcare system?
I think the biggest group of workers within the healthcare system is nurses. And so there's not much happening within healthcare that doesn't directly or indirectly have something to do with nursing. So I think if we get the base right and we get our staffing correct, then a lot of those other issues will sort themselves out. A lot of the wait times are because we don't have staff. If we fix that, the wait time should be fixed. If a lot of the frustration in our emergency departments is because people are waiting too long, and they get frustrated and they get angry, and then they take it out on a nurse. Well, if we had enough staff, then the wait times shouldn't be what they are. And if we're increasing the amount of nurse practitioners and family docs and others in the primary care system, and they're being seen in the appropriate place and not in an emergency department, that would be helpful. So there's lots of things that need to happen, but we've increased nurse practitioner positions in this province. We've increased primary practice where people can see a nurse practitioner or a family practice nurse or a family doctor. Those have been increased. We have nurse practitioners now that travel from community to community. It's not ideal because we should be seeing the same provider, but it is that all of that is helping. So we are making pretty significant progress, but we've got a ways to go.
Now, while some would argue that they are filling vital gaps, the NDP in particular has been critical of the current government's use of travel nurses, claiming they're costing taxpayers too much money and not really giving enough in return. What is your opinion of the use of travel nurses?
I agree. Now, I want to be really clear. It's not the nurses themselves. It's the companies that they work for are making a tremendous amount of money off the backs of Nova Scotian taxpayers. I think we could use that money more wisely, for sure. This government, however, has told healthcare providers that they need to figure out a way to be less dependent on travel nurses. And the reason they're dependent on travel nurses is because of the shortage. And so, some of our facilities in rural Nova Scotia, especially, they wouldn't be able to be open at night if it wasn't for travel nurses. So it's sort of a catch-22. So it all goes back to having the right amount of nurses in the system. That everything goes back to that. And so continuing to educating, continuing to recruit them, fixing the violence, fixing the work-life balance, all of that will decrease our reliance on travel nurses.
I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to speak with me and our viewers. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
Thank you for watching. Please tune in again to find out what we will be talking about on The Record.